Yo, what is up? You have found We Like the Blazers, and I am your host, Ryan Whitty Whitledge. And with me, as always, is my good friend, Mr. Brandon Goldner.
Yo, what's happening, man? Yeah, I'm here. I am here. I am.
You didn't
pumped.
die.
I didn't die. We just got back from Hood River for our fourth kite surfing lesson. And this was the one where it actually started coming together. So I'm like, I was already excited, but now I'm like extra super excited because we're getting on the board with some consistency and actually going for little rides, as opposed to the lesson I took last time where I was just learning how to get up on the board, and I took like a 30-foot face first Superman face plant into the water. So yeah, I'm a little sore, but I'm feeling great and just like full of energy and like ready to rock.
Nice.
Yeah.
So me and my son. So like I've been trying to tell the wife that for my birthday this year, that I want to go skydiving. Now my birthday's in November,
Nice.
so I'm not entirely sure what the weather is going to be, but I've always wanted to go skydiving, and so I just let her know that like that's a present that I want. And then my son, who is like a tiny little daredevil clone of me, also said that he wants to go skydiving for his 18th birthday. Luckily, I have 8 years before that happens. But I just so happened to come across, as I'm scrolling through like Google News or whatnot last night, an article talking about the next biggest asteroid that is going to be the nearest pass by Earth. The thing is 1,100 feet wide. It's named Apophis. And it will pass 20,000 miles away from the Earth, so that's even closer than like most of our satellites and the International Space Station and all that stuff.
Yikes.
You're not International Space Station, but most of the satellites. And so I'm like, oh yikes! And it's due to make its crossing in 8 years on April 13th, which is my son's birthday, and is also a Friday the 13th.
That sounds like we're gonna die.
It does. And so I told him, hey, the reward for us living as a species is going to be on the 14th. On Saturday the 14th, we can go skydiving for your 18th birthday. But I don't think that like planetary killing asteroid on a Friday the 13th is a good day to test fate to jump out of an airplane.
Maybe the asteroid would block your descent and like soften your fall.
Just you can superhero it, and it's like,
yeah.
If you don't like vaporize or whatnot, like land on it and ride it like Bruce Willis.
Well, I was like, I've been falling down these YouTube rabbit holes, as I tend to do anyway, but because I've been looking at how to get better at kite surfing, and there's this one video, this guy apparently hooked up to the back of a boat. And so, I don't know, have you ever been parasailing? I haven't.
I have once, and I accidentally kicked a dolphin. So
you've kicked a dolphin? What?
I was with my ex-wife, and our honeymoon was in Maui, and so we went parasailing, and we slowed down enough to where like you drug your feet in the water.
Right.
Did not notice the pod of dolphins jumping right below me, and when my feet drug in the water, I kicked a dolphin. So
That's insane.
I feel horrible of that, because one of my other lifelong dreams is to swim with dolphins. I didn't want to immediately get in the water with the pod I had just kicked, because I think they're smart and they'd remember, and dolphins are notorious rapists, and I didn't want them to try to rape me as payback. But
what do you think the percentages of people who've actually kicked a dolphin? I feel like it's pretty. I think you're in kind of rare company.
It's probably like I should have bought a lotto ticket or something like that after the day. But
that's wild. But this dude had like hooked up to the back of a boat like you would if you were parasailing, except for he was kite surfing, but so the kite was serving as the sail, and the boat is pulling him, and he's getting higher and higher and higher, and then he releases, and now he's like free falling. And kite surfing kites, they're not parachutes. They're not meant for going straight down. They're meant for angling against the wind. Yep. to propel you forward. And so this dude is having to do all these twists and turns in order not to fall out of the sky like a rock. And it looked like he got his lines twisted, and it looked like he almost died. So all of this is just to say, A, don't kick any dolphins, and B, don't hook yourself up to the back of a boat if you're only using kite surfing gear, because that is not for being pulled. That is for letting the wind pull you. So yeah.
How many more lessons do you have before you're allowed to roam free in the wild?
That's actually a great question. So we're going to Hood River. You can do it in the ocean, but in Hood River, they have a good little spot to do it, but it's pretty busy. You basically need to be proficient enough to be able to ride against the wind to be able to get back the way you came, and I'm not there yet. I'm guessing it's probably going to take 3 or 4 more lessons of 2.5 hours apiece. But I will say that we have already bought a couple of kites and a couple of bars that had the lines on them because they were on sale. So we're like halfway geared up. We still need to get the harness. We don't have wetsuits. So yeah, it's just to say, like, if you have a chance to do it, like, it does take a hot minute to learn how to control the kite. The learning curve is pretty steep, but it is so much fun. Today, again, like, the feeling of just flying across the water, even 20 seconds at a time, for me, super fun. So yeah.
Should I be good or proficient, or at least not embarrassing at like wakeboarding behind a boat first? Because that's a skill I still don't have.
That's actually, it's a good question. I would say that because so much of it is the kite control, that it may not matter. Because once you get the kite positioned properly, once you're able to pop yourself out of the water, it's called the water start. That's the part that most people have the most trouble with, is just getting started. Then kind of being pulled, a lot of it is sort of instinctual. So I don't know if you've ever like skateboarded or snowboarded, or like even they say like if you have experience like sliding across an icy sidewalk, like if you have that level of balance, or like sliding across the linoleum floor with socks on, if you can do that, then you got the board part down. It probably doesn't hurt, but I don't think it's required. Most of it is the kite's kind of touchy.
I can do the Tom Cruise across the floor in the socks. I'm fairly decent at ice skating and rollerblading. Skateboarding I gave up when I broke my arm, and the last three times that I've went snowboarding, I've gotten a concussion. So mixed bag for me.
Sounds like you're ready to go.
Yeah. What could happen? What could you do besides kick a river dolphin? And then you have bad luck for 7 years. Are there river? I don't think there's river dolphins. We have river whales. We have river whales. They come up. Well,
that's just the insult you call me when you see me in a wetsuit.
A river dolphin.
A river whale.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll hold that horrible joke back. But all right. So I had an entire plan of what I wanted to get into today, and then
you did.
The national narrative just took over, and so I had to strongly pivot. And I'm kicking my idea for next week because I hate it when people do like the individual podcast episodes of where they're like, all right, let's spend this entire episode talking about the guards on the team and whatnot. Over at Blazer Tag, I was like, we do our preseason roster rankings and whatnot, and I always like to compare at the end of the year. Well, lucky for us here, none of those assholes remember where their list is, and I actually do save it on my computer. So we will be bringing that to you next week, and I will be forcing you to do research. But until then, the thing that you wanted to talk about that I said, sure, we can carve out 5 minutes for, is now going to be our actual in-depth conversation today. And
it's almost as if I knew what the people wanted to hear, Ryan.
Well, yeah, I mean, you argued with them enough of them on Twitter, so maybe there is something to that.
A quick aside on that, I am turning over a new leaf. I'm done being argumentative on Twitter. I've had enough of it. I
will believe it when I see it.
I've done it for a long time. I do enjoy it, and I actually I think I've gotten to the point where, I don't need to use insults or anything like that, but I do not mind getting into it with people on Twitter. I'm done. There, it's just, I thought about my dear grandmother. I now have what I call the Grandma Audrey rule, where would my dear sweet grandmother, who's no longer with us, would she be proud of what I'm posting online? And so the quick rubric is, she was a kind person. She always believed the best in people, gave people the benefit of the doubt. She was super funny, super sarcastic at times, but basically was like a decent human being. I'm going to try for that. We will see how long it lasts. We're on like day 2, and I think I'm doing pretty good so far. But yeah, I will leave the arguments to other people. Maybe I'm just getting too old for it. I don't know, man. Maybe it's just age.
I like my approach, and that's when it starts turning hostile. Just turn towards self-depreciating humor. It's kind of like the Eminem thing from 8 Mile. If you say everything mean about yourself, then they can't. If you start off your argument going, "Well, I'm an idiot, but here's what I think," what are they going to do? You're an idiot.
It's a great way to diffuse like a weird situation. I wish I had known that like when I was in middle school and high school. I think that could have served me really well. But
I was in school. I was the person that anytime anybody tried to pick a fight, I would just act the craziest because nobody wants to fight the crazy guy because you don't know what the hell they're gonna do. So yeah, I would out crazy everyone, and they'd just be like, "Okay, never mind, I'm walking away."
it's a great strategy. I dig it.
So the popular topic of the day is the Blazers coaching job desirable? And there's a bunch of articles out there and whatnot. I have my own rankings. I started getting into it a little bit with you via text thread, and then also some people online. But so what I did is, because I had nothing better to do today, is I went through and I looked at all the open coaching vacancies. So we have the Portland Trail Blazers, Orlando Magic, Boston Celtics, Indiana Pacers, Washington Wizards, New Orleans Pelicans, and did I say Dallas Mavericks?
I don't think you had, but you did know.
Dallas Mavericks. And so I went through and looked at the top 5 to 6 coaching candidates that those teams have, and for this mostly I went with the local beat writers, because especially here in Portland, when we read a national media narrative, it is normally completely different than what our local beat guys get. So yeah. I wanted to look at who the top contenders are, because one of the big things on if the coaching job in Portland is desirable is, okay, well, how many overlapping candidates do we have? So
I see. So you really put in the work.
I put in the work. I have 3 different article tabs sitting up here as reference, and I have I ran down this whole damn gambit.
I'm impressed. And so with that, though, you know what happens when you have a good idea is that you're the one who has to execute it. So how do you want to steer this ship? Where do you want to begin?
Okay, I want to real quick. We're gonna talk. I'm gonna give you what I have for my order of what the desirable rankings are. I'll start off with talking about the team, why I have them in that spot, and then I will go over who their main candidates are. Yes, question in the back.
Question in the back. Are we including the Milwaukee Bucks on this list? Because I'm pretty sure they're going to be looking for a new coach.
They are an asterisk that we will talk about after the fact, because Mike Budenholzer is an interesting candidate to think about, because is he a desirable coaching candidate with what why he would get fired from the Bucks with what he's shown?
Right.
Is a good.
And the Bucks are an interesting team for coaches to consider. Like that's like I'll let you go in a second, but that I when I think about this, it is that balance of like the places that a coach would want to go and the coaches who are available, and how that dynamic plays against itself. And maybe this comes up later, but particularly, I think that like when you have more vacancies, you will get coaches or assistant coaches who maybe otherwise wouldn't get a lot of look if there was only 1 or 2 positions available. But because there are so many vacancies, multiple teams are interviewing multiple people, and then you may have this like bubble of like new coaches who you wouldn't have considered are now kind of in the running in a way that they wouldn't have been before. It's just it's just an interesting dynamic. So yeah.
And real quick before we start this, I want to ask you a question, because I know you're kind of going into this somewhat blindly. You follow the same news I do. Do you think that there's a lot of overlap in these 7 jobs between candidates?
So you did the work, so you know the answer. So I'm going to embarrass myself. I would have to think there is some overlap, and like maybe it's not like, let's say that each team has like 5 people that they like. I'd say probably like there's going to be a lot of overlap between 2 or 3 of those positions, and maybe the 4th and 5th are kind of different. That's what I would think. It
is. And what I find interesting is that
I was right.
But the biggest overlap is not in the high profile names.
Interesting. Okay.
Like the second tier level is where you end up finding a lot of overlap. So I think we'll start this off. The number 1 desirable coaching job in the league right now, unequivocally, we can all just say it: Boston
Celtics.
Yes.
Oh, really? I have a slightly different take on this.
But with Boston, I mean, the tandem of Tatum and Jaylen Brown wing combination, it's yes, there's shakeup there, but there's also stability in the franchise, and that Brad Stevens has been there and he got elevated. It's not like they're just looking at new people. The expectation will be to win now, but it's probably appealing to get to work with Brad Stevens, who's spent time with this roster to build it a little more. And the Eastern Conference is always a little bit of a weaker conference. You do have Boston as being a very storied and historied franchise. There's some lore power and attractiveness in just being able to say that you were a coach of the Boston Celtics. So I have them in my number one spot. And they're real quick. They're top candidates as it stands right now. They are down to their final three because they're moving on to a second round of interviews. Chauncey Billups, Becky Hammond, and Ime Udoka.
That was quick. They are they're really cracking the whip on that coaching search. And again, this is what it goes back to. It's interesting that if there are other coaches like Mike Budenholzer who may be available, that Boston has maybe already just kind of thought, well, not interested. I think it's smart they're moving fast, though, because if you are one of the more attractive locations, why wait? Why not get the person that you want? Boston for me is up there. I will say who my number one is, who I think is probably your number two.
Actually, you know what? Here's how I want to go. So,
sorry.
If I'm gonna give my number one when I list a team, just tell me where they're at on your list.
Got it. And I don't have a list in front of me, so I am going into this very blind and no notes because I'm irresponsible like that. But my number one would be the Dallas Mavericks. That's who it would be for me. Oh, sorry. Okay. You said to put them where I thought they would be. The Celtics, I think, would be number two for me.
Okay, number two. Sorry. All right. So for me, in my second ranking, this is now where we get a little bit controversial and where I got a lot of internet blowback. I put Portland as the second on this list. Ahead, there is.
Ooh.
There's.
I don't know.
There's. I mean, for us locally, we see a lot more turmoil and upheaval and whatnot and question. I love how people are like, oh, how attractive is the team if the team's going to be selling. If the team sells, it's not moving. And yes, there is normally some ownership shakeups and whatnot, but I think that the Blazers are at best the best short-term solution. You're looking at a lineup, if depending on how things go with off-season signings or trades, of basically Damian Lillard, CJ McCollum, hopefully Norman Powell, Robert Covington, Yusuf Nurkic. That's a great team to walk into.
Why do you think the team wouldn't move if they were sold? That I don't understand that.
The league won't allow it. The league's been looking at expansion. They coming off of the pandemic, every major sports league, I think outside the NFL, because they're just still a money printing machine, is looking at expanding because the expansion fees just to get the right to spend more money is $2 billion.
Isn't there like a whole kerfuffle though in Minnesota about Robert Sarver and he didn't put a clause that prevented it from being moved, and now the minority ownership is pissed at him that there is not a no move clause? I thought there's this whole thing. Okay,
but you still need league approval.
Yeah. I guess what I would say is I don't know if selling the team makes it more likely that they would move, but I don't think that selling the team makes it any less likely that they would move.
If the only way that I would be worried that the Trailblazers franchise would move if there was already a team reestablished in Seattle. They will not give up on the footprint of the entire northwest section of the country, no matter how much and the Blazers tend to be like the little brother of the NBA. I just don't see that happening. And especially with the bad optics that everyone still has a bad taste in their mouth from the Celtics, or not Celtics, the Sonics previously, and now you're going to take their I-5 rival just down the road away as well.
Yeah,
I think Silver's smarter than that.
This is a topic for another day. But I'm sorry to interrupt, but I was just curious about that point.
Yeah.
Okay, so continue. Blazers.
Anyways, I just think, and you may call it my hometown bias, I think it is a great situation. There is a lot of win now expectations coming in, and there is the little bit of the hiccup of hey, so if the team doesn't perform, is Olshey out the door? And with that, will there be a new coach or a new GM that comes in and brings in his own coaching guy? I don't think that it matters. And I think that especially with the list of candidates that the Blazers are looking at, they're, let me scroll up here real quick. They have, Chauncey Billups, Mike D'Antoni, Becky Hammond, Don Staley, Brent Barry, and, there was the brief kerfuffle of Eric Spoelstra or whatever. But with those, I view enough hubris and cockiness in some of those first-time candidates that, especially with them being former players and whatnot, that they can come in and be like, no, I can fix that. I can do better with that. I read something the other day where it was that it's assumed that Mike D'Antoni could come in and it's a perfect situation for him because if he fixes it, he looks great. But if it doesn't work, oh, well, he'll get a coaching job somewhere else. I don't want that in a new head coach. I don't want somebody to just go, oh, well, if it doesn't work here, I'll get something else. I want you to come in and give a fuck. And so, that's when I look at Billups and Hammond and, Don Staley, and I'm like, those are people who will come in and give a fuck and actually will probably interview and take the job because they think that they can do it. And Damian Lillard is a, top 5 to top 10 player in the league. Why wouldn't you want to play with him?
That's true. I have a couple reservations about this Blazers team if I were a coach, though. One is that Damian Lillard is an aging star. He's 30, right? A second one is your point about Neil Olshey, that, he's on thin ice. And I think it's very possible, if not likely, that he gets fired after this next season, if not before. I think the ownership situation, whether or not they actually change ownership or the team sells, leaving that part aside, Jody Allen's ownership style is not really well known. No, there's not a lot of history to ask people, how is it to work with this person? Like, you can't really do that, can't feel that out. I think that's a problem. I don't know if this roster is going to stay the same, if CJ McCollum's going to stay on the team. I don't think the team has a championship ceiling, in my opinion, but if you trade him, what are you going to get back? Like, there are a lot of unknowns here. I think the biggest thing, if I were a coach and why I'd be concerned about coming to the Blazers, is that we don't know what's happening with the general manager. And this is where I don't mean to... I think there are like a couple different subtopics that we could talk about related to this. Mm-hmm. One of them are the coaches we might want to see, but another is kind of how do we evaluate Neil Olshey and think about the way that the Blazers are running their coaching search. And so I'm going to really briefly on that point say, I think Blazers ownership, Jody Allen and Vulcan, have a stronger hand in this coaching search than people might realize. And the reason why I think that is we heard those rumblings about the Blazers going after Eric Spoelstra, right? Mm-hmm. And my understanding, and this is one of the very rare times that I can say that somebody gave me some information and I trust it.
Both you and I had sources that whole day we were texting about with this.
Exactly. I don't think we've had a chance to talk about it on the pod, though, right?
No.
Okay. So but really briefly, because I want to respect your structure here, but really briefly, I think that Blazers ownership has more to do with this coaching search than we might realize, which would actually make it more likely that a coach would want to come here if they know ownership is running the coaching search and therefore there's more stability. But the reason why I think that is it is my understanding, I'm not reporting this as a fact, but it's my understanding, I have reason to believe, that Vulcan, they were the ones pitching Eric Spoelstra, and it was coming from over Neil Olshey's head, that trying to get Eric Spoelstra to Portland was not Neil Olshey, it was specifically Vulcan. That is why I think that maybe ownership has more of a hand in this coaching search than we might think. But leaving that aside, all those reasons I just talked about, the Blazers were not number 2 on my list.
A devil's advocate that I could make for the little bit of pushback or whatnot, even though I slightly agree with you on the Vulcan going over Olshey's head, I could also see it as that Jody Allen being a quote unquote new owner. I'm going to say that she still gets the final say, but if you're going to talk about Vulcan, I'm viewing that as a lot more of Burt Cold. I could see the hubris being that discussing Eric Spoelstra and Neil Olshey saying that's not going to happen because he's a little more interconnected in the league than, Burt Cole or any of the other higher ups within Vulcan. And they're going, well, I mean, why aren't we trying? And Olshey kind of viewing it as that I'm not going to waste my time in this coaching search just to get told no when I know the answer is no. And then Vulcan going ahead and trying on their own, not necessarily a going over his head, but I'll give the benefit of the doubt a little bit to Olshey in that maybe that was a thing in which he goes, it's not going to happen. And they're like, oh, well, we think that, it could happen. Representatives from Vulcan try themselves and it doesn't happen. And Neil Olshey gets to sit back, pet his little white cat and say, see, I told you so.
I like that, but I have a different take. So this is not coming from a source. This is purely me. I think the explanation is simple. They were going to let Eric Spoelstra have some general manager authority of some sort. Because,
like an assistant general manager role or something like that.
Yeah, because in my view, that's the only way you'd get him out of Miami. Because I don't think if you say, hey, come be our coach, he's like, well, I'm already a coach here. I think if you say, come be our coach, and you have personnel power, I think that becomes more attractive. And so in my view, if that did happen, if that's why Vulcan went to Miami to try to get Eric Spoelstra, then I think it suggests that Olszey's power may be waning. I think it suggests that maybe Vulcan has a stronger hand in this coaching search than we might have expected to begin with, which, if true, I think actually bodes well for the Blazers because, again, whether he is or not, it's perceived that Olszey is on thin ice. If I were a coach, I'd be wary of that. But if it were ownership saying, hey, we're going to be here, don't worry about it, your job is secure, then that might make me feel safer as a coach. So
yeah,
but
I agree. That was a fun 3.5 hours to hope and dream, wasn't it?
Oh man, it was just so many hopes and dreams. That would be incredible. I mean, because he really is one of the premier coaches, and he's still young, and he's from Portland. And if he took Olszey's job as well, I'd be happy about that because I don't like Neil Olszey very much. So, but yeah, the Blazers. All that to say, they're not second on my list.
Yeah. Okay, my third, I guarantee this will be massively controversial, and very few people will agree with such a high ranking, but my third is I have the Orlando Magic.
What?
Yep. In third
Why?
place, I have the Orlando Magic. So I will say,
you think people really like Disney that much? Come on,
hold
man.
on. Their current candidates are Clippers assistant Kenny Atkinson, Becky Hammond, Lakers assistant Jason Kidd, Bucks assistant Darvin Ham, Nets assistant Ime Udoka, and Nuggets assistant Wes Unseld Jr.
Okay.
So the biggest appeal for them is that, a rebuild is not the worst place to be for a first-time coach. And you're looking at that list and you're getting a lot of first-time head coaching jobs. In that case that you're probably going to be playing out the first contract that you get, because as long as you're there, you're getting draft picks. I think they have 2 top 10 picks just even this year, but there's a job security and there's a little bit of a relief for a first year or first timer to be able to come in. And again, it's in Florida, great weather outside of hurricane season, and no taxes. So that's why I'm ranking them that high.
That's interesting.
Now the other thing is, I will say, all of this list is completely subjective and whatnot with all of this. But if anybody's interested, hold on, I got it on my phone here real quick. I gotta look this up for half a second. It was a very interesting premise. But over on Basketball News, Vinny Del Negro wrote this piece back in November of 2020. And he was talking about when he was interviewing for head coaching jobs and talking about the difference between the process between teams. He's saying, when I interviewed for this Lakers job, it was completely different from when I interviewed for this other job or for the Bulls job or whatnot. And what the thought process is based off your experience as a coach when you're looking at jobs. And in that piece, he did touch on that there's massive appeal in going to a rebuild such as the Orlando Magic. Now, granted, like I said, this piece was written back in 2020, so we can't directly reference this current coaching search, but a lot of the things that he says do apply.
I think that what you're saying, though, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that this kind of a coaching job would be appealing to a certain kind of coach.
Yes.
Okay.
And that's why, like, if you look at their list, the Kenny Atkinson, Becky Hammond, Darvin Ham, Ime Udoka, Wes Unseld, you're not getting the Mike D'Antonis or whatnot. I think Jason Kidd is the most experienced head coach on their list.
So wait, but I think this brings up a good question of how you ranked this, and I don't mean to pick at it too much, but just to say, like, I guess when I think of, like, which team is the most attractive, I think about which team is the most attractive for the best possible coach. So, like, a hypothetical Eric Spoelstra has to pick somewhere to be, or Greg Popovich or Steve Kerr has to pick somewhere to be, which team would they want to go to? But that's not how you're evaluating it. You're doing it a little bit differently, which I think is interesting and totally valid.
Well, because you need to take all those factors into account. No different than, like, we say Portland can't get free agents or whatnot because, it's not a certain place to live. It doesn't have a certain percentage of an African-American population, or, the tax rate is too high. And that's why Texas gets so many things, and that the tax thing in LA is canceled out because you're in Hollywood. There are all these different factors besides just looking at a roster and going, hey, these are the guys that I have.
Right. But I think that, like, what I hear you saying is that Orlando is appealing to a new coach because they have a softer landing if things don't go well, that they're not going to immediately be judged and ridiculed and, possibly hurt their reputation.
And even no matter like a new coach or like, I don't think a Mike D'Antoni is going to go there or whatnot, but even somebody
no, he is not.
But if
Mike D'Antoni is not going to the Orlando Magic. Sorry, I don't know what that is. I don't know what that is.
Never do that again. But again,
no promises.
It's you have at least a 4-year job security, and I think that is extremely also important for somebody looking at being a head coach.
I will say, actually, I'll play devil's advocate to myself. A job like Orlando is also somewhere where you could possibly win Coach of the Year if you turn it around. Like, if the roster gets better a little bit and someone develops and, like, you're a better coach. And so, yeah. Whereas the chances of getting, like a Coach of the Year in somewhere like Portland, where they were already a pretty solid playoff team, like, less likely, right? Because Coach of the Year is basically like, how much did your team improve? And, like, almost nothing else goes into that. Kind of like, anyway. All right, Orlando, interesting. So they were not very high on my list. And it's because, again, I was thinking of the best possible coach where they would want to go. They don't really have many great players on their team right now. They do have cap space, which is great. And they are in Florida. So, yeah, they were in the lower tier on my list.
Yeah. Okay. So my next one after Orlando is, and again, just because I know I'm leaving some high profile names off here, my next one is Indiana.
This is just so weird. Okay. It's because of Sabonis, isn't it? You're just a big Sabonis guy.
Well, I mean, yeah, I like his dad, and I think that as an aside, he is an oddly gorgeous man.
He is a beautiful man. Absolutely, yes. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. But so they're top candidates right now, and everyone that I list first in these, when I say what their candidates are, the first name that I name is their current number one, based off what I could find. So their number one, Terry Stotts. They again are looking at Kenny Atkinson, Chauncey Billups is on there, Brett Brown, Miami Heat assistant Dan Craig, and this is the the first time that I come across Mark Jackson's name being on the list.
Yikes, Mark Jackson. I don't get that at all. Okay,
I've never understood the coaching appeal with him, but with the Pacers, it's they finished the last season, they were 14th in both offensive and defensive efficiency. There's the tools there, with some Sabonis and Malcolm Brogdon, Karis LeVert, Miles Turner, TJ Warren. That's it's not bad, and I think that's a good landing place for someone like Stotts, because Indiana doesn't have a lot of expectations. Yeah, it's like they're not a championship or bust team. They're just kind of do a little better than we did last time. And in all actuality, the only reason that this Pacers job is opened up is because their coach that they just fired after 1 year was a complete and utter effing asshole.
Yeah, Nate Bjorkgren, who was was an assistant in Toronto. Great X's and O's coach. Kind of an asshole, and it turns out the kind of an asshole part is actually more important in 2021. Like, you can have your assistants run the offense or run the defense and have that filter through you, but like, ego and player management is a huge part of coaching. In fact, I think I would argue the most important part. The interesting thing about Terry Stotts too.
I was going to say kudos to Kevin Pritchard for coming out and saying like, "Hey, my bad, we done effed up, so we're going to take a little bit of time."
Well, would you look at that? A general manager actually taking accountability. Unreal. I wouldn't know anything about that here in Portland. So the interesting thing about Terry Stotts, too, is that even people who didn't really like him here in Portland would admit that he can get lesser talented rosters to overachieve. And the Pacers have some talent. Like, I'm not saying that they don't. They really do. And I think that would be a great fit. I would say that, to me, from the beginning, the rumblings were that Terry Stotts would end up in Indiana. So at this point, I'd actually be surprised if he didn't end up there. I will say for myself, Indiana was also not very high on my list. They were kind of near the bottom, near the middle of the bottom. Again, I don't have it written down, so I can't give you a number. Like 5, 6 for me out of these 7 was probably what it would have been.
Great. Let me see. So that is currently on There are my 4. There we go. That's where we're at in the listing. So
we have 3 more. Yeah, 2 of which I'm shocked that you haven't mentioned. But again, I think when you say the next one, I'll explain why the way that I evaluated it was maybe a little bit different from you.
Okay, great. So you know that I have the Dallas Mavericks next.
I didn't know that, but I was hoping it was either them or the Pelicans.
So with Dallas, their top candidates right now are their current quote unquote current defensive assistant Jamal Mosley. That is a favorite of Luka Doncic's, which, as we've talked about well here with Damian Lillard and preferred candidates,
kind of important.
If Luka's going to advocate for him, then it's probably his job to lose. They also have Jason Kidd. Terry Stotts, interesting to see in local media come up on their list, because if they just let go, I mean, I know that Stotts didn't coach Luka, so they don't know each other as having worked together before, but interesting to get the Rick Carlisle disciple.
And he worked with Dirk, and Dirk is now like some special advisor to Mark Cuban, because Mark Cuban pissed everybody off, and Bob Voulgaris is pissing everyone off, and anyway.
Yeah, and then they have the Slovenian national team coach, who I'm going to give a shot on his last name. I'm not even going to try for his first name, but it's Kokoslav. Sure.
Oh, yeah, Coca-Cola. But totally,
anyways,
that dude. Yes.
He's the Slovenian national team coach, and he coached Luka Doncic for 2 years before he came over to the NBA and actually won some of their championships over there. So there is obviously a history of success. And then, of course, Becky Hammond.
Interesting. Okay.
So before you say why you had Dallas higher, but my thing with Dallas is that, like, right now, if you look at them, they have their front office going back. I mean, I think it was just this year, end of last year or whatnot. They have a front office with a history of sexually abusive behavior. This damning piece comes out in The Athletic talking about all the this dysfunction going on, and Don Nelson and everything. And Mark Cuban literally calls the article bullshit on Twitter, and then goes ahead and fires Nelson, who I believe his tenure in that spot is longer than Cuban's ownership. So he had been there. He had been there longer in some form with the organization in a management role.
In some form,
for longer than Cuban had owned it.
Well, I remember his dad, Don Nelson, right, was legendary coach who coached in Dallas for a while. So.
Exactly. And then, after all that said, Rick Carlisle goes in and sits down and has a meeting about what the future is and decides to say, you know what, I'm good. I got 2 years left on my deal. I'm out. So there's obviously there's a massive amount of dysfunction there. And then if you want to mix that with the rumors that Luka's developing this diva attitude, and then even right after they got bounced in the playoffs, Porzingis is talking, and I know you can make the connection between like what Porzingis saying he's unhappy and underutilized, and Nurk saying the same thing or whatever, but there is that Porzingis unhappiness, and like how if somebody can come in and maximize his stuff. But I'm just saying, like, how attractive is, I think their franchise, for as much quote unquote turmoil as us Blazer fans think the Blazers are in, I think there's a lot more turmoil going on right now in Dallas. Now, the one caveat you get is that Luka Doncic is a very young generational superstar who is getting ready to sign his brand new max extension. So how appealing is just the option of coaching Luka? Does that outweigh absolutely everything else that appears to be going the fuck on in Dallas?
I think that is kind of the most important thing. So,
is Luka a better player than Damian Lillard?
Yes. Yeah.
Currently, right now, you think he is? Or is it? Are you only factoring in the age?
I think he's currently a slightly better player. Not the leader Dame is, and I think that there's more to being how you can elevate the rest of your team part of it. And I think that really matters. But yeah, I'd say Luka's better than Dame. Sorry. I mean, that kind of, it pains me to say a little bit, and it's funny how easy it was for me to say that.
That just rolled off the tongue.
It did. I hadn't thought about that really. So that was my gut reaction. I think Luka is. But I think that's the most important thing. And that's why I have Dallas very, very high on my list, is that you do have a generational superstar in Luka Doncic. And if the Blazers organizational, discontinuity that the GM may be on ice, and they needed ownership needs to figure their stuff out, like that could probably be forgiven if Dame were like 24 or 25, but Dame's not. Dame's 30, and Luka is 23, 22. And that matters a lot. So if I'm a coach, that's what I would be saying to myself is, fuck everything else. I have the opportunity to coach somebody who could be like a multi-time MVP, and that kind of opportunity just doesn't really come around kind of ever. And if you are a really good coach, like that's something you take advantage of. And for Rick Carlisle, I'll just say, by the way, people who are saying, oh, we don't want Rick Carlisle in Portland, he's basically Terry Stotts, like, they are completely different coaches. They are very, very different in a lot of different ways, from strategy to how much they've adapted over time to Rick Carlisle is an asshole and Terry Stotts is not. Like, look at Rick Carlisle when he left Dallas. He had this list of people he wanted to thank. He thanked Mark Cuban. He thanked Dirk. You know who wasn't on that list? Luka Doncic. He's the best player on his team. He didn't even thank him. Like this,
because half the reason he was out is because there was the quote unquote friction developing between them.
So for people saying that Rick Carlisle is strategically, personality wise, adaptability is not like Terry Stotts. The fact that Stotts coached under him doesn't make them the same person. So, but just to say that if I were a coach, I would be looking very, very strongly at that job. Now, with that being said, I do think you have to look at the Bob Voulgaris stuff, Mark Cuban's meddling, that Donnie Nelson was fired. I think it is a good move that they're bringing Dirk Nowitzki on as like a special advisor to help with the coaching search. And I think you mentioned earlier.
Special advisor, I think he's a safety bubble between ownership and whoever the F they hire. He is literally there to just play like divider.
That's great. And that's, hey, maybe if Mark Cuban is realizing, hey, I should take a half step back, a quarter step back. He's one of the most active owners in the league. I mean, he's effectively been the GM in Dallas the entire time. Like Donnie Nelson had the title. Mark Cuban was making the decisions. Nothing happened without Mark Cuban making it happen. I mean, 2011, they win the title, and then Mark Cuban gets cheap and doesn't bring the band back together, and then they're not as good next year. It's like you could have won another title. So anyway, all this just to say, if I'm a coach, I'm looking at Luka. He's young. He's a generational superstar. That's attractive to me. So that's why I had Dallas very high up.
My hot take, I don't think that highly of Luka. I have Dame head.
Really?
I have Dame head and shoulders above him. I would
man.
if you were to give me the option like blank slate and say you can build a team around Luka Doncic right now and you can build a team around Dame right now, and I'm just going to take age out of the equation, just style of play, leadership, all that kind of stuff. Give me 1 year of either one of those. Dame hands down, not even close.
I don't know, man. Like, Luka is a very talented scorer. He is bigger.
I think the media likes doing nothing but beating themselves off to Luka, and it drives me insane.
I think it's because he's really good.
He's really good, but he's a whiny bitch, and he's a horrible leader.
Who cares? Okay, at some point...
And there's something to be said about being
a
good leader if you're going to be the face of the franchise.
There totally is. I also think that with that level of talent, it's not like everyone hates Luka. That's not the issue. Like, he's just not... he is a little whiny.
He's been the shit since he was like 16 and playing on freaking teams overseas.
A lot of NBA players are in the exact same boat, which is why ego management is an important part of coaching, right? Like, which I think is where
I don't think Luka wants his ego managed at all. I think he wants a yes-man coach.
Probably not. One more thing about the Rick Carlisle, Terry Stotts stuff, just because it pisses me off so much when I see that. And I'm not doing it on Twitter anymore, but I guess I can still do it on the podcast. Sorry, Grandma. But like,
you get a lot more than 240 characters to do it on a podcast, though. So nuance and inflection can be obtained.
Can help. Yeah, you can actually hear people's tone of voice. The funniest part about the Rick Carlisle, Terry Stotts stuff is like when Jason Kidd was there as a player, and right before Dallas won their championship, Rick Carlisle, as he is wont to do, was trying to get Jason Kidd to play a certain way, riding him pretty hard. Do you know the person who told them to ease off of Jason Kidd and let him do his thing? That person's name was Terrence Stotts. So, like, that it's a very clear demarcation between the styles of those two coaches. And I think that Rick Carlisle has probably benefited from having... Ownership has had his back, and to Mark Cuban's credit or whatever, like I think Cuban's got a lot of problems, is not the best manager in the world, and that's why Carlisle left. But like he had Carlisle's back like all the way till the end. Like I believe it when Carlisle says it was my decision. I totally do believe that. So, and I do think Carlisle will struggle in without ownership having his back so much. I think he's going to struggle a little bit. So anyway, but all this is to say, for me, if I were a coach, Dallas would definitely be way up there.
Okay, all right. Well, you're one of those media slews then.
Bruh, but Luka's good. All right, we're going to argue about that some other time, but yeah, he's really good.
Speaking of generational superstars, the next job on my list, which is second to last, is the New Orleans Pelicans, because this is a franchise that is rumored to now be running out its second number one pick in the manner of a decade. Anthony Davis didn't want to play there, forced his way over to LA, and now there's rumors that Zion Williamson and his family personally prefer that he not play in such a small crap hole of a town as New Orleans or whatever, and that the Pelicans franchise is kind of a little bit of a joke. I love the fact that, people try to justify of like, yeah, but would he really likely try to give up like a range of about like $70 million extra that New Orleans can offer him? Yes, we've seen other people do this.
Yeah.
Or force their way into a sign and trade because players have so much power that they can do that. He's not going to give up money. And if he goes to a different or quote unquote bigger market, I mean, everyone's thinking that he's making lovey-dovey eyes with New York. To go and play in New York and get the marketing opportunities that he would have there, I think he would roll his eyes at $70 million because he can make that up in a heartbeat.
Yeah, I think that's fair. It's definitely concerning seeing those comments from Zion Williamson's family, and also like we're at the point in the NBA where if players want to go somewhere, they're going to figure out a way to go.
Contract money just doesn't mean what it used to anymore. You have besides just shoe deals, which used to be like a secondary source of income, like back before Jordan made it or the Jordan days exploded it. You have your main contract, you have your shoe. Everybody gets a shoe deal. You have your social media marketing, which, paid ads or whatnot, hell, that works. Your own personal endorsements. You're not just relying on local TV deals. You're seeing all sorts of stars get national deals, no matter how big. The contract money is no longer enough, and you can build a market and make up your money elsewhere.
Yeah, I would say, though, like for Zion saying, well, I want to be somewhere else, that's fine if he does. But I don't think that anyone can use, they didn't build a winner around me as the excuse, because he's been there for 2 years. Like, they haven't really...
He just this season crossed playing 82 games in 2 years.
Right.
That's like Greg Oden-ish.
Right. And he's not a super duper star like Luka Doncic. He may get there still, and he has flashes, but he's not there. And yeah, there just hasn't been a lot of time. By contrast, someone like, for example, Damian Lillard, there's been 9 years where you could have crafted a championship roster around him, and Blazers have not done that unless you maybe count 2015 before Wes got injured. But I actually had the Pelicans pretty high on my list, but the more I think about it, the more they may be dropping a little bit. Because if Zion doesn't want to be there, then it's sort of like the young star is what's interesting about it. And I do think that maybe if you have the right coach and David Griffin, pulls his head out of his ass and makes some moves, like I think the Ingram, Lonzo Ball, Zion thing is like just maybe that works in theory, but it's not working in practice. Like he needs to sort that out. So some different players, a different coach. I could see Zion maybe being an upper level kind of like, second team All NBA type of talent. Did he even make All NBA this year, Zion?
I don't think he did. I don't have the list directly in front of me, but I don't think he did.
I'm going to have to Google that.
One of the other things, too, is like I touched on it with, I don't think it's as big of a deal for the Blazers because I don't think they'll be moving or anything. But also, I believe the lease is up for New Orleans in their building after next season. And they have made absolutely zero attempt to work out an extension or anything like that. So they have a lot more ownership stuff hanging over their head than I think even the Blazers do right now. So that plays into it. Right now, their top candidates are Nets assistant Jackie Vaughn, who a lot of people like for the Blazers. Ime Udoka, again, he is probably the most crossed over, which people are the most pissed that he's not on the Blazers list. Bucks assistant Charles Lee, and once again, Jason Kidd.
Interesting. Huh. Well, yeah, I mean, again, like, honestly, the Pelicans were pretty high on my list, but after thinking about it and talking about it, like, maybe they're falling a little bit. Yeah. So,
yeah.
I don't know.
And I think we're all in agreement that Washington Wizards close out the bottom because Washington's kind of been a joke of a franchise, laughing stock of it for a little while. Real quick, their top candidates are Wes Unseld Jr., again, 76ers assistant Sam Castle, Becky Hammon, Mark Jackson, and their own assistant in-house Robert Pack. So, I mean, Bradley Beal, I think he's on like the last year of his deal. Russell Westbrook, how much more can you get out of him? Are him and Beal going to be able to play together? There's just so many questions hanging over the Wizards. I mean, they have a couple good pieces, like a Rui Hachimura and whatnot, but yeah, that to me is just easily the least desirable job that there is.
Same. If I were a coach, I don't know why I'd want to be there, honestly. No offense.
Yeah. So just to clarify then, my list goes Boston 1, Portland 2, Orlando 3, Indiana 4, Dallas 5, New Orleans 6, and Wizards 7th. I will say, because we said we'd touch on it, the minute that Mike Budenholzer gets fired, you can just vault Milwaukee to the top of that list and kick everybody down a spot.
Yeah, interesting. Yep, I think so. I think that's right. Milwaukee has a ton of talent. Antetokounmpo's under contract for a while. They should be a better team than they've shown. So, yeah, I think that I don't know their contract situation, but I think that they're able to bring their main pieces back around Giannis. So, yeah, I agree with you. That'd be the most attractive place for me, too.
All right, so that wraps up our little bit of a coaching talk. We are going to take a quick break, and then we'll come back and talk about change in Blazers broadcasting.
That's I don't know, that's the interlude music.
Okay, and we're back. Everybody survived that pee break? No.
Yeah, I think so. It sprayed all over the walls, on the floor, got a little bit on my cat, but we'll figure it out.
Why is your cat so close to you when you're taking a leak, man?
I don't know. Actually, I will say, though, sometimes when I'm, taking a poop, my cat will come up and, hang out. She thinks it's, hangout time, and I'm just sitting there on the toilet,
My little Chihuahua dog just sits and stares.
Yeah. You have those people, you see those pictures, the cats, climb inside of their underwear, and they kind of hang out there, pants at your ankles type of thing. Cat's just chilling in there. A little warm spot to be.
Not a cat person, didn't know that was a thing. Kind of disgusted. You need
Apparently
to wash
it is.
You need to wash your cat more.
I'm glad that my cats don't do that. One cat doesn't shed a ton. The other cat does. Glad that doesn't happen with the cat that sheds a ton. That would not be pleasant at all. I probably wouldn't allow that for the same reason. Just don't need any extra cat hair down there at all. It's fine. It's fine the way it is.
So outside of this, all these coaching vacancies in the NBA, it's funny because midway through the week, I'm thinking about us recording, and I'm like, what the F are we going to talk about? Seriously, how many times can you have a coaching discussion? I thought we were going to spend most of the episode or most of this, doing roster rankings, bring up the Eric Spoelstra thing, and then, hey, well, that was a good 20-minute pod. See you next week.
Yeah.
But somehow, some way, the basketball gods giveth, and we have all this news, and we get to talk about all these vacancies and rank them and rate them, and hey, that'll actually play into a search algorithm hopefully. But and then the other bit is that the Blazers have Blazers Broadcasting, which is their in-house broadcasting, has nothing to do with Root Sports on this end, have parted ways with Jordan Kent and are opening the door for the rumored return of Kevin Calabro. Now, for those that aren't up to speed, Kent finished out the quote-unquote bubble season remotely after Calabro cited concerns about COVID safety protocols and his desire to spend more time with his family. I think it was billed more as a retirement, if I'm not mistaken, when he stepped away. So then at the start of this season, Kent was offered the full-time play-by-play duties. And that was his first official time as a play-by-play guy. So that was rather impressive. He had never done play-by-play before for anything other than esports games occasionally. He had been in studio with Blazers Broadcasting for a while, doing some pre and post with Brooke and all that. But he stepped in raw, never having called a game, and called most of the games remotely from the Blazers Broadcasting studio. And even when they made it back into the arena, when fans were allowed in and they were expanding that kind of stuff, they weren't down on the sidelines. He was sitting way, way up in the rafters and whatnot. So I was rather impressed by him. He was growing on me. I know some of his euphemisms that he threw out there and whatnot were a little stretched out. But again, you have a guy who this is his first full-time year. I was impressed. And I thought him and Kent had a great relationship. They just needed to swap sides. Kent was sitting on the wrong side, and so was Lamar Hurd. But Hurd should always be on the left-hand side. That's just how broadcasting goes. But I thought they were building a great rapport. And for one, that easily gave Blazers Broadcasting the sexiest broadcasting duo of anyone in the league, hands down. Not gonna lie,
those are best gorgeous dressed. Men. Yeah,
exactly. Those were some dapper people. But yeah, so Calabro sat out the 2021 season, and apparently he now has the itch to return to the booth, and the Blazers are making a hard push for him. I mean, what I have my thoughts and feelings on this. I'll dive in, but I'll let you kick this off first.
I appreciate it. I am not happy with this because I think it's disrespectful to Jordan Kent.
Holy shit, we agree.
Yeah, no, I think it's disrespectful. I don't think it's fair for somebody in a field where there are so few positions where you could possibly go to get work, if he wants to do play-by-play, he gets the opportunity to do it in the most adverse broadcasting conditions possible. We've seen tons of interviews from people who do play-by-play saying this has been the most difficult time ever as a broadcaster, not being able to call the game live. It's very, very hard. And I don't think it's fair or respectful for the Blazers to let him go. Oh, COVID's over. We're back in person. Okay, bye. Thanks. Like, yeah. I don't think that that's fair at all. And I that's not to say anything about his skill or Calabro's skill. It's just that right there. Like, you have to give someone an opportunity to grow into their job in an actual normal in-person environment and then make the call. They should have given him that. I think it's disrespectful.
Yeah, for me, I just don't like the optics of the move. Like, unless Kent went into it and went into this job knowing that it was like still only a fill-in role, it just seems dirty to me. I mean, Calabro basically retired, and even though he was considered one of the best at it, especially on a national level, I mean, he's called finals games, he's called NCAA championship games. We know his resume and whatnot. Canning Kent, when he was just getting started, it doesn't seem right. And I liked Calabro. He'd been here for 4 years, basically 3.5 technically. I think 2016 is when he started, but I mean, I liked him, but he just always had that national vibe to him. And like, I know I'm not the first person to say this, but I completely agree with the opinion. Like, when he would welcome you in, he would welcome you to Portland, Oregon, as you're watching on NBC Sports Northwest. This is the local team feed. You don't need to tell us where we're watching the game from. We damn well know where we're watching the game from. He just always had that national feel to him, and I understand that when they made the change, regardless of how you feel about the firing of Mike and Mike, I don't think any of us like that. I will, for my fandom, no. I will always consider Mike and Mike as my announcer guys. It's going to be Mike and Wheels. That's who I always think about with Blazer Broadcasting. And that's, by the way, no offense to Travis, absolute fantastic guy. He's doing great. But, it was long rumored that with Paul Allen being a Seattle guy, and Calabro being a Seattle guy, that's why he made the push to get Calabro. But again, it's just, he retired. This seems dirty. I don't like it. And I don't know. It doesn't sit right with me.
I don't like it either, for all the reasons that you just said. To talk specifically about Jordan Kent's skill, he definitely got better, again, which is why I would like to have seen him call games in real life. It's possible that he would have been even better with more experience and actually being able to see the games. Because again, I can't repeat this enough, that people who do this for a living are saying that it's almost not impossible, but it's very, very hard to not do it live. And so he should have gotten that chance. I will also say about Kevin Calabro, I think that he is great. He has a lot of skill. I appreciate him. I think that he is well respected around the league. And so particularly, we're in an era where the NBA and teams, their games are on League Pass a lot. And so people are experiencing other teams' broadcasters more frequently than they may have in years past. And that he's well respected around the league. I was never like the biggest Kevin Calabro guy, but I also didn't dislike him. I appreciate an announcer who is a little bit of a homer, like just a tiny bit at least. Like
not full Mike Rice.
Not full Mike Rice, although I think that had its time and place. But for example,
I think they should have let him drink more.
Oh yeah. For me, if it were me, the best combination right now in 2021 of Blazers broadcasting would be Lamar Hurd on the color commentary with Mike Barrett. I think that would be such an incredible combination, because Mike Barrett, super professional, super great at his job. Also, a little bit of a homer. He's got some personality there. And I think that he and Lamar Hurd would play off each other so well. That's not going to happen. It's a pipe dream. That would be great. Yeah, and it does. Yeah.
By the way, anybody who wants to hear, I think, Mike Barrett's most kind of raw thoughts or whatnot, or of how his dismissal went. Wheels just had him on his podcast here, I want to say a week or two ago. And why am I blanking on the name of Wheels' podcast?
Believe in Blazers.
Yeah.
It's the Believe in Network, which is weird, BLEAV. So I think it's called Believe in Blazers, which is a weird name, I have to say.
Just rolls right off the tongue. But
it does not.
But Barrett really opened up about, like, how he was informed, what the process was, that they had let Rice go before him and all this stuff.
Mike Rice didn't really know he was fired when he walked out of the room.
Yeah,
I love that part.
Yeah, no. So anybody who wants that history can go back. One of the things that I'm curious about is is broadcasting going to change moving forward? Like, it's funny to think about, but like, teams are businesses. They look to cut costs whenever they can. I'm going to say that because, especially in Blazers broadcasting, the broadcast partners and whatnot travel with the team, but you're still bringing extra camera equipment, studio equipment, all this stuff, is one of the cost-cutting measures is that you've now found that you have the ability to have your broadcasters do this without traveling. Like, say they only send Brooke to do the sidelines because that's something that you can't get while doing remote, but you have your actual play-by-play guys sitting in a studio. Is that something that's going to be a little more normal? And then two, with Calabro having cited one of his reasons for not wanting to do it besides COVID is he wanted to spend more time with his family. Maybe is that in the works of staying locally or whatnot? Is he going to be allowed to sit in his basement and make calls? I don't know. I'm pontificating a lot about this, but I'm curious to see how broadcasting is going to change. Kind of like how life in general for, a lot of remote working and whatnot and office jobs is changing.
I think that's actually a great question. I think that it probably changes more for reporters. I think teams are going to take advantage of that they haven't had reporters in-house to really limit access even more and be like, oh, you can hop on our Zoom and
I hope that goes away.
It's not going to, because that has a very clear, the teams have a priority to keep as much outside reporting away from them as possible because they have their own communications teams, their own reporting. They don't want negative press. They don't want to invite people in to ask questions that may make them look bad. So what are you going to do? Limit access. I think that's going to be pretty prevalent. But for play-by-play, we've heard too many people say this is very hard to do and the product suffers. We've seen this, right? Like, I've listened to it, and like Marv Albert, maybe not the greatest example because he's 7,000 years old, but was very clear. It wasn't just that he was getting older. It's the fact that he couldn't see it live, and it was just odd. So I personally think that is a cost that they're going to bear because the product is just not good enough without people being there live. But I think it's a really important point to make. It's like, what other kinds of things may stay the same or maybe different from the way that we remember because of this time of working remotely and stuff. Yeah, I think it's a good point. Good pontification. A good word there, pontificate. That's like a word of the day calendar right there.
No, I don't think that it's that deep of a pull. I don't know.
I don't know. I don't really use it in everyday conversation. I'll say that.
All right. Last little bit of topic, and then we got a couple actual questions that came in. I think that I asked some great questions on that Twitter thread, but we got two or three really good questions on here. But last little bit of news is that Damian Lillard is committed to playing in the 2021 Tokyo Olympics.
Good.
Training camp for that starts on July 6th, so fingers crossed when I'm there for 4th of July weekend that I will happen upon some form of NBA party.
Yes.
But Lillard cited his desire to play for Team USA and this will be the first time in his career that he'll suit up for the Olympic teams. It's always been one of those things where, I was slighted or this or that or whatnot or whatever. But he cited especially playing under Greg Popovich because he's taken the head coaching reins. Other notable players so far that have already committed: Draymond Green, Jason Tatum, Bradley Beal, Devin Booker, and Stephen Curry. Absolutely that have declined: LeBron James, Anthony Davis, Jimmy Butler. There's obviously going to be more. There's a pool of 57 candidates, but like I said, training camp for this starts on July 6th. I think as things currently stand with where Game 7 of the NBA Finals would be scheduled is that the earliest of anybody who's playing in the NBA Finals could join the team would be July 22nd. And that, I think, is like a week before the qualifying games start. So it's one of those things where, like, I can understand if you end up making a deep run, especially seeing as that the league is turning over the start of the season to regular time, you're not going to get a lot of those, which just looking at this list, I'm like, all right, 5-guard lineup, go.
That's what it's feeling like to me too. Yeah. And I think this is great. I think it's great. I think Damian Lillard deserves it. He's earned it. He's good enough. Memory is serving me. If memory serves, I think that Damian Lillard is a proud person. I think he declined it last time because he had been snubbed before.
Yep.
Okay. So I'm glad to see both sides have kind of been like, hey, look, like, This is great for Dame. I think it's honestly great for Portland too. This helps the Portland Trailblazers profile to have somebody on the Olympic team.
Well,
yes,
and it helps a profile. And I mean, go back to before the Big Three gathered in Miami. The biggest recruiting pitch that there was. People talk about like players mingling at the All-Star game and whatnot. The biggest recruiting pitch where LeBron James, Dwayne Wade, and Chris Bosh all decided that they wanted to get together to win a ring in Miami was on the Olympic team. This is a great chance for, players to pitch and recruit and whatnot and like nudge people on and be like, hey, maybe you should demand a trade. Maybe, blah, blah, blah. We're looking at this. We're looking at that. Why don't you come play with me? It's a great recruiting tool, no matter how you think, like how cheap or lazy that is. But yeah, you get the national acclaim if you do great playing for Team USA, and you get your star players having the ability to go and chat in other people's ear to lay some groundwork.
And also, that's why it's important that whoever the next coach is had better have Damian Lillard's very, very, very strong blessing so that Dame can use that if that's what he's going to do, if he's going to try to convince folks, hey, like, let's team up in Portland, that part of it is like, and we have this rad coach who I believe in, who is really cool, like, come play with us. Like, that's an important part of it too. So
still maintain it's Chauncey Billups' job to lose.
I really think it is, unless he wants to go somewhere else.
You sound so depressed, but that makes me so excited.
I'm not depressed. I'm having, I'll be honest, like, this is a conversation to unpack on a different day because we're running out of time, but it's hard for me to reconcile his past, frankly, with his present. And I think that, we are, for anyone who feels the same way I do, who is just struggling through that, we're probably going to have to get used to it unless Chauncey wants to be somewhere else. It's very clear that he's the number one on the Blazers list from Neil Olshey to Dame. So yeah, I think we're going to have to figure it out. So yeah.
Go back 2 episodes ago. My thoughts. My feelings. There's a difference between stuff. But all right, we'll wrap this up. We got a couple quick questions. This Ryan Whitledge guy threw out just some absolute zingers that I think I'm gonna throw in one, just one,
okay,
because both you and I qualify for this question. Are jorts okay to wear after 35 years old?
I think that they're okay to wear if you want to wear them, no matter your age. I'm a big proponent of whatever makes you happy, you should do if it doesn't hurt other people. I personally wouldn't, but that's also because I want all my clothes to stretch. I need to be able to move. Like, I'm not going to wear jeans that don't stretch or jean shorts that don't stretch. So maybe if there were a really good, stylish, stretchy pair of jorts, you might see me strutting around in them. They're not my style, but
like
I say
some Jinko jorts.
Yeah, it's like some Jinko jorts. Oh man, you could fit so many things in those. So I say do what makes you happy. That's my answer.
Okay, all right. Now on to the real question. So Logan at Logan Akio, if I'm going to pronounce that right, asks, how are you enjoying watching the semifinals as a Blazer fan? I'm a little sad that the Jazz, as another small market team trying to maximize their best role players, lost to the team with the best wing player again. Without a superstar or a big market, can a small market team or can a team compete? For me, I'm going to be completely honest. I have not watched a single second of basketball since the Blazers have been eliminated.
Good man. Yeah, I have.
I follow along a lot. I will have Twitter up, TweetDeck up, and whatnot, and I follow along with the proceedings. But I have not actually watched a game. Hold on, maybe that's not true. I think I watched a little bit of the Suns closing out their last series, a couple minutes of that. But that's about as deep as I've gotten in. Also, on that note, so I do have to apologize to Flagrant Mag. Because I was the one who started the trend of every time there's a flagrant foul saying, did somebody say flagrant, and tagging them in it. and apparently they got upset when Jokic got his flagrant and his ejection that I did not tag them, and they literally sent us a check-in, are you okay? Because they didn't hear from us. So
That's
I apologize
funny.
to them. But yeah, so with me, as far as the Jazz go, not a big Jazz fan, music-wise or team-wise. And I fall into the category of that I do not understand why everyone has constantly hyped them up. I know they had the best record in the NBA, but I wasn't a big fan of their team, so I'm really not surprised that they got their ass kicked.
Yeah, I will say the question at the end is, can can a team compete without a superstar big market? Yes, the West is super ultra wide open this year, which is why I'm so disappointed the Blazers didn't advance. Because look, like the Clippers are missing Kawhi Leonard. Like that's huge. Like I don't know. Like the Suns.
Paul George figured out how to be playoff P.
He finally did. And the Suns are really, really good. I'm not trying to take anything away from them, but like, so I don't agree that the dynamic between the Jazz and Clippers was you had the Jazz, a small market team with role players, versus the Clippers with a bunch of wings, because Kawhi wasn't playing those last two games. Also, Donovan Mitchell was hurt. Also, Mike Conley was hurt. The dynamics of that series were odd. You had some role players on the Clippers step up in a big way. You had Patrick Beverley just bombing threes at last game, like somehow out of nowhere.
Ty Lue benches Rondo. Playoff Rondo.
Yeah, I think that's, and actually, by the way, I'm not a big Ty Lue coaching fan, but his adjustments have been very, very solid. The Clippers were down 0-2 in both of these series, came back to win. In this one, they won 4 games in a row.
Ever.
Yeah, it's so. Anyway, I reject the premise of it being like, oh, small teams are not being successful in the playoffs, but I am disappointed that the Blazers couldn't still be there. I don't know. It would have been great to see. So, oh well.
Yeah.
It's what it is.
And again, it ties back into something I had said earlier. I don't fully buy the small market, big market difference. I do understand there are advantages for LA and New York. Outside of that, I don't think Giannis's career has taken a hit. I don't think Donovan Mitchell's career has taken a hit. I definitely don't think Damian Lillard's career has taken a hit for them playing in small markets. And just as an aside, wasn't it you that I saw the other day that was attempting to argue on Twitter before you had become a better human being about the media market size of Phoenix, Arizona? Was that a you thing that I saw?
I don't remember why. What was the argument? Phoenix is a little bigger than Portland, right? It's not that much bigger.
Well, I think I don't know why I thought it was you. Maybe it's just because I'm used to seeing long threads with you arguing about people. But it was talking about Phoenix being a small market team, and somebody's like, "Oh, that's the 6th largest city in the country, or whatever."
Oh,
it was the difference between
right.
like the media market and the population size.
Right. Yeah. No. Yeah. That's right. That yeah. That's a good point.
Was that you?
I don't know if it was. I had talked about the market size before, but I'm not sure what you're describing was me, because I don't remember zooming in on Phoenix. But anyway, yeah.
Yeah, but either way, whoever that was, they did bring up the
Phoenix is not really a small market. Maybe that's the point.
I think Phoenix does count as a small market because media-wise, they are smaller, like only a hair above Portland. But if you're just talking about market size in general, yes, they're 6th largest city. Obviously, they dwarf Portland. I think they have like 4.5 times the population of Portland. So, yeah,
okay.
It depends on the perspective in which you look at it. All right, next question. This comes from that genius again, Ryan Whitledge. Who was the best Doctor Who?
You said one question.
Yeah, I'm sneaking another one in. Who is the best Doctor Who?
I don't know. I'm not a Doctor Who fan. Sorry.
I can't pod with you anymore. All right,
okay.
Guys, we're wrapping this up here. We'll talk to you later.
Bye.
It's David Tennant. It's not even close.
I've heard of that name, so I'll go yes. It's not Benedict then. He was one of the doctors, right? Benedict Cumberbatch, wasn't he?
He was never one of. He was Doctor Strange in the Marvel universe.
Oh, see, I don't know, man. All right, I'm not a Doctor Who fan. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just not into it.
I gotta kidnap you for a weekend and just refresh you on all current pop culture.
I probably do need a refresh.
Okay, let's see. And so, final question before we wrap this up. So, Matt George Moore from @MattGeorgeMoore. Whose departure would have the least impact on the team's fortunes? Carmelo Anthony, Norman Powell, or Derek Jones Jr.? And then the second part, who will have a bigger impact next season, Anthony Simons or Nasir Little? So, part one, who do you think leaving would have the least impact on the team?
That's interesting that he went with Derek Jones Jr. So my immediate thought was to agree with him based on the role that Derek Jones Jr. had last year. But then my second thought is to disagree based on the role he possibly could have under a different coach if he were to develop more.
Is he our new Batum?
Well, that's actually an interesting comparison, not because they're stylistically the same, but just like a lot of potential and maddeningly inconsistent. Although Batum, to be fair, was a much better player in Portland than Derek Jones Jr. has ever shown.
Yes.
I'm gonna agree because I do think that like the Melo legacy bonus points actually does have some influence and some pull around the league, at least like maybe marginally for free agent signings, for example. We haven't seen that actually happen in practice. Then again, the Blazers don't have cap space. I'm choosing to believe it.
Coming to Portland doesn't bode well for marriages, apparently.
Apparently not. Yeah, poor Carmelo and Lala are now broken up. That's a bummer. Oh. But yeah, I think I tend to agree with them on the first point. And then on the second point, I think it also will be Simons. I think that's also the safe pick. I would like it to be Nasir Little. If it were Nasir Little, because Anthony Simons played a pretty significant role down the stretch, and I expect him to get better. So if it's Nasir, that means something's going very, very right. So hoping it's Nasir, thinking it's going to be Simons. What about you?
Yeah, for me, I have a lot of caveats on mine. Like, for me, I think I agree with Derek Jones Jr. just because of the diminished role that he did have. Carmelo Anthony, instinctively, out of my dislike of him on this team, I wanted to say him, but for me, I can't, because that's addition by subtraction. So I think that him leaving will have the biggest impact, even more so than Norman Powell. Yeah. But yeah, Derek Jones Jr. is probably he would be the least impactful person to lose. Who will have a bigger impact next season? My caveats for this is Nasir Little, and I don't want to down on him from his COVID stuff, but he's had a lot of other health issues that we kind of didn't know about. You know, he had this fainting and whatnot and dehydration spell when it was in the bubble. He had various other things that I'm pretty sure kept him out of the lineup that we didn't fully hear about the reason why. We're just sitting there screaming, going, why is he a DNP? Well, it's probably because he had some underlying health issue. Go back and just look at his games. It's obvious. Simons depends. Are we still going to treat Simons as a point guard, or are we finally going to acknowledge the fact that he's a shooting guard?
Yeah.
Because where you started seeing Simons flourish is when he started playing as a shooting guard, when he would be out there with Dame and Dame was handling the ball. The misconception that sadly Neil O'Shea has of that we have a backup point guard in Anthony Simons, that is wrong, Bob. You have a shooting guard that you are forcing to be a backup point guard. So if the Blazers can get somebody like, hey, say, I wanted an Austin Rivers well, that's a bad example, like a Jeff Teague or something to come in and actually play a backup point guard role or whatnot, and have him out there with Anthony Simons, I think Anthony Simons will have a much bigger impact playing his true role as a shooting guard. Nasir Little, it's all just health dependent, but I agree with you. If he's having a great year, things are probably going either fantastic or completely off the rails, and that's the best we got.
Oh, gosh. Yeah, I didn't even consider that. If he were doing better than Simons, then something could be very, very wrong. Yeah, I mean, and Nasir Little, health dependent, also like development dependent. It's so funny if you were to take your 5 favorite NBA players and think about what they looked like when they just started. And some of them maybe were good right off the jump, right? But most players weren't. And you can sort of see that what Nasir Little looks like right now, if you squint, if you really try hard, you can see a very good player there, which obviously the Blazers drafted him thinking the same thing, right? Like a lot of people really like him for that reason. But we don't know right now what's going to happen. Like, so it's very like kind of, multiverse theory. Maybe this tracks with your Doctor Who fandom, but this
they're crossing streams again. Multiverse is the new Marvel thing.
So. Okay. Well, geez, the point is that, like, there's a universe in which Nasir Little just kind of is the player he is today, and then there's a universe in which he develops and is amazing, and like I hope that we are in the second universe and that he's amazing, but yeah, time will tell. We'll see.
Yeah, and there is the caveat too of that we did know that Stotts did not like to play rookies, so what can his development be under a coach that maybe is a little more lenient with rookie playing time than Stotts was. So
in Stotts' defense, I mean, you have a team that always wanted to make the playoffs, and rookies are usually not ready to play. Like, there are.
I would challenge you to go back and look at rookies and their impact this year.
This was an odd year for rookies, wasn't it? It feels like there's like everyone is saying the draft wasn't very deep, and all of a sudden there are like a lot of rookies who were actually contributing. So yeah, it was odd.
Yeah. All right. Well, I know you told me that I needed to do it, but I need you to take us out of here.
No problem. I appreciate you for doing all the homework and all of your research. It made the show much better, and thank you for doing that. And thank you all for listening. If you want to reach out to us, you can always do that. Let's help Brian remember for next time. It is at WeLikeTheBlazers.com or just at LikeTheBlazers on Twitter. And I would love if you were to search for We Like the Blazers on whatever podcatcher you're using, whether it's iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher. I use a program called Castbox. I don't really care what you use, but if you were to subscribe and leave us a review, if your podcatcher lets you do it, for We Like the Blazers, we would like you. So that's pretty much it. Yeah. Thank you. And yeah, I am stalling now because I don't know if you wanted to say something else. That was pretty much it from you.
Go Blazers.
Go Blazers. Nice. Okay, that worked.